Hey everyone, it's time to Nefis and chill. In this video, I'm going to be talking about a interview with creative director Rich Lambert of ZeniMax Online Studios, overseeing the Elder Scrolls Online at the moment. And this interview was done by James Batchelor, the editor-in-chief of GamesIndustry.biz, so it's going to be pretty interesting. What you're going to find in this video is I'm going to read it out loud to you, and then I'm going to go over it in terms of my perspective as a primarily in-game player and also a ESO content creator. I hope you've been doing well, guys. It's been a very busy past week. I saw this interview actually when it came out on the 18th, but you know, it's been a very busy week of life and in-game activities for me on Twitch. So yeah, let's go over it. So this is going to be titled Making an MMO for Solo Players in the Elder Scrolls Online, and I have a feeling this is going to be linked to my future Ashes Creation content, where I'll be talking about not just Ashes Creation, but how I have things in relation to Ashes Creation which have led me to kind of look at that as a potential, kind of like future, perhaps. But that's kind of a different story, but just from the title alone, here we go. Making an MMO for solo players in the Elder Scrolls Online. ZeniMax Online's creative director Rich Lambert talks us 8 years of trying to appeal to both longtime series fans and ravenous MMO veterans. Since 1994's Arena, and particularly since 2002's Morrowind, the Elder Scrolls IP has been synonymous with vast open-world single-player RPGs, where fantasy fans can lose themselves in a mix of epic main quests, exploration, and an abundance of side content. But how does that translate to an MMO where each hero is surrounded by potentially millions of other similarly epic heroes? That's the hard part. Most Elder Scrolls fans don't want other players in their game. Rich Lambert, ZeniMax Online's creative director for the Elder Scrolls Online, tells GamesIndustry.biz. We got a lot of that feedback early on. It's a, I don't want chocolate in my peanut butter kind of thing, where people want to feel that they have direct influence over the world and that their choices matter. We learned a lot about how to tell those kinds of stories. I think we found a really good balance. There are good choices for players to make, but at the same time there are other players in your game, so there are some things that you have to do. He points to examples from the MMO's early days, where hundreds of players would be trying to reach a major boss at the same time, something that really turned some of the traditional Elder Scrolls fans off. Over time, ZeniMax Online developed new techniques and ways to layer what players could see. It's basically like your own private instance for that last boss, Lambert explains. That's where the single player things come in. You go in, get your own encounter with that boss, you can invite other people to it, but nobody else can accidentally come in and take over and kind of ruin that experience for you. Another example he offers is the game's ability to hide NPCs. If you embark on a quest that involves killing a character in the world, that character will subsequently be hidden to you, but other players will be able to see them. Where necessary, the game will change the name or look of an NPC in a way that is consistent with both the game's structure and your own narrative. It ultimately comes down to doing as much as you can to make the player feel like they're special and that they're the only ones that are there, but they know there are other players around, Lambert says. Really early on, we try to make it so the world actually changes. So you go in and save this village, and then you go to the area and the village is saved, and someone else comes in there and they're basically on a different layer and there's hostiles everywhere. That was really good for the world changing and the story changing aspects, but it destroyed players being able to play with other players because they were separated, so we had to find a balance there. I spent probably the first 6 months of launch fixing those types of issues. Ultimately, the game is an MMO. You are supposed to develop those relationships, that's part of the magic. You find other people of like minds, you find guilds, and you end up logging in to play with those people. The content is there, you can play it and enjoy it, but you really log in to talk to those people. The balance a team needs to strike is making sure ESO offers something for everyone, whether it's a solo Elder Scrolls fan looking for an alternative to yet another Skyrim playthrough, or a hardened MMO fan diving deeper and deeper into endgame content. Lambert says there is plenty for the former, and for the latter, there's everything from bosses that require multiple players to take them down, to 4-player dungeons and trials and raids that support up to 12 people. The hardest part in all of that is trying to figure out the roadmap of things, he adds. It's a persistent world, so players are always in there. What other alternative activities they're doing? The story only takes you so far. We launched a chapter that's 30 to 40 hours of content in it, and hardcore players will polish that off in a week. And they're like, give us more. We can't build content fast enough. We have to have all those supporting systems on top. To inform that roadmap, Lambert says ZeniMax has learned how to break down its player base into segmented cohorts when analyzing their playing habits. For example, the team is able to compare the behavior of players who predominantly spend time on PvP, solo PvE, or group PvE activities. They then ensure there's new content for that group with every major update, of which there are 4 every year, amounting to about 60 hours of new content in total. Lambert previously admitted to us there has been some crunch involved in the past, and this is a hyperlink to another article, but says processes have been improved and management expectations have been reined in to the point where this is less of an issue than it once was. The ZeniMax teams also take care to ensure an ESO can still welcome new players, tweaking previous tutorials or creating brand new ones with every expansion. Lambert says in emphasis here is that unlike some other MMOs, there is no need for new users to work through past content in the right order. Much like the single-player Elder Scrolls games, this is designed to allow players to simply choose a direction or quest line and see what they discover, with the MMO scaling the level of enemies to match your character. The big thing in ESO is more about the player's journey through the world rather than hitting some arbitrary level cap, and then the game opening up and turning into a different game than the leveling experience. That's our philosophy. It works really well. We have played a lot over the years with how we onboard players. We used to do a brand new tutorial for every new chapter, which helped onboard you onto the chapter story, and then if you want to go outside the chapter, there are vectors to other zones. That worked pretty well. With the Blackwood chapter, we gamified it a little bit. You get a little bit of story as to who you are and what you're all about, and then you're given a choice. You walk into this room full of portals, and there's an NPC that talks to you about each of the stories that those portals take you to. Then you could go and do that story. The Elder Scrolls Online is now in its 8th year of operations, and even now, the way forward is built on the foundations from earliest learnings, most notably who the developers are trying to reach. We tried to appeal to MMO players and Elder Scrolls players at the same time at launch, so we tried to find that happy middle line, and we didn't, says Lambert. Neither really enjoyed it. There was a cool core game there and people liked it, but they didn't love it. We focused on this being an Elder Scrolls game first and foremost, and that really informed a lot of decisions we made. There's the added pressure of carrying the torch for the Elder Scrolls, overall Elder Scrolls brand, as Lambert puts it. While Skyrim continues to be released on every new platform possible, ESO stands as the only new entry in the franchise since 2014. And while the Elder Scrolls 6 was announced in 2018, Bethesda's focus on Starfield makes it unlikely there will be updates on the forthcoming RPG in the near future. With Elder Scrolls fans chomping at the bit for new content, Lambert is confident his team can keep them satisfied. We're happy with what we do, and most importantly, we had the full support of the Bethesda Game Studios team. Early on, there were some struggles and trust issues there. Who are these guys coming and take over the IP and whatnot? But we have a great working relationship with them. We can sit down and talk about things and come to agreements. There's a lot of trust there. The latest expansion, High Isle, launched in June and added the Sisters Isles, a new archipelago never seen in any previous Elder Scrolls title. Lambert says the team is already hard at work on 2023 content, with plans for 2024 and concepts taking shape for the years beyond. It can take just over a year to build a new zone for the Elder Scrolls Online, while Lambert is confident it will see more expansions in the years to come. As long as there's people that want to play ESO, we're going to continue to support it. Alright, so that is the end of the entire interview. It was a brief interview, I would say, in terms of not just... I think there were like some multiple layers touched on that I think will stick out to players who played this game for a long time. And on the surface level, it sounds really cool to newer players. I'll admit that. But yeah, let's kind of break down the article, and I'll give my thoughts. And if you don't want to hear my thoughts, you're more than free to close the video. But yeah, thanks for watching if you are going to make it this far, and that's it. Alright, so when we talk about, and this came up a lot when I brought up the issues with racial passives and how a lot of people seem to want to kind of lean more towards the RPG side of the MMO as opposed to the MMO. Zos very rarely likes to say that ESO is kind of like an MMO. Matt Fearer, the studio director, has often said in the past in many interviews that he doesn't really consider ESO as like a traditional MMO. But it seems like even internally, just judging from what they said, at least about when they were developing ESO early on, and even now, that they can't seem to find that middle ground between MMO and solo RPG. It's interesting that they emphasize that, hey, we're going to keep it Elder Scrolls first. And that's okay, I think. I think having some sort of Elder Scrolls theme, Elder Scrolls stories, Elder Scrolls characters, Elder Scrolls kind of like feel to at least the, I guess, surface layers of the various systems of the game, I think that's fine, But when it comes to balancing for combat, and also kind of trying to get the RPG players more to the MMO side, I think that's definitely where they do struggle a little bit. And I don't really blame them for that, because it's kind of like, okay, well, we want to provide everyone, and it's like they're trying to make everyone happy, but clearly they can't do that. I mean, no one really can, and kudos to them for trying. It's just that I feel like they should. It's always kind of felt weird in terms of combat balance as well for me, as whenever I'm PvPing or PvEing, it's just kind of like, I can see what they were trying to do, even from PTS patch notes and stuff like that, even really unpopular PTS patch. I can see what they're trying to do, but it's like they're trying to sort of have the cake and eat all of it. You can't really appease the MMO players with Elder Scrolls stuff, and you can't really appease the solo players that never want to group up with anyone else with, either the group content or how you get into the group content. I think there's also other issues too in terms of the reward system, that or rather lack of a reward system for a lot of ESO, which is a very, very common topic that gets brought up by not just me, but many other people. So there's that, but I do respect that they were trying to at least find the middle ground. And I think there is the added pressure, but the added pressure I'll kind of get to the end. One thing that really stuck out to me in this interview was choice. And a lot of people, understandably, are, like, a little wary of MMOs where either PvE or PvP is kind of enforced. So just to give an example, like Lineage 2, or even the upcoming Ashes of Creation, a lot of people are saying, oh, Ashes of Creation, that's going to be a very PvP-centered game. PvP MMOs don't work. Well, okay, sure. But I think that's also kind of a different story. But here, it's more of like, well, you can choose between solo play or MMO. And it's like, in ESO, I think they do that fairly well with the instances, with the instance boss's request. Even like delves is like okay, it's just okay, right? I think it's just really hard to try to appeal to solo players and MMO players at the same time. But you can't also say MMO players can't be solo players, right? I'm not talking about the crowd that like absolutely refuses to play with anyone else or interact with anyone else. I think that's almost impossible to do unless you're just kind of questing, right? And even then, it's like you'll still run across players, or potentially need some help or assistance, depending on the kind of player you are. But I think there's still a kind of tension here in ESO's development, and also balancing for combat between the land of the solo casual player and the land of people who want to progress through the MMO system and want to be better. So I get what they're saying here, and I don't envy their position if that's what they're trying to do still after 8 years. But yeah, that's pretty much it in regards to what they said at the beginning. And the second thing that stuck out to me is a roadmap, right? I mean, we've been asking for a roadmap for at least the ESO combat balance. What are the foundational stuff? What is not going to change anymore? What is going to change? We kind of want to know as players if you guys have a roadmap, at least for the combat team. We kind of know basically at this point what the content team's roadmap is, essentially every year since 2017, which is 1 chapter, 2 dungeon DLCs, and 1 zone DLC. And that's also a different story. I love that they touched on all these different topics that we can talk about for hours on end. But the roadmap, as far as content goes, they talk a lot about it here in terms of like in relation to player consumption of either the chapter or a DLC. What's really interesting to me about this roadmap, though, is how they kind of structure it. And I'm gonna take this as them saying, well, since 2017, we've kind of seen this metric. So 3 years in, 4 years into the game, since after Morrowind, we see this metric where, okay, we have the PvPers, we have the solo PvEers, we have the those raiders over there, those role players over here. It's really interesting that they do divide the player base into population segmented cohorts, as they say here, and then decide what kind of content to put out with the major updates. For PvP, I guess it makes sense if we're looking at metrics, right? I mean, I feel like after IC DLC, and after kind of about Battlegrounds update, which was Morrowind and a couple updates after, I feel like probably just because of the changing times and stuff like that, PvP got a lot less popular. So that may have actually informed to what kind of content they should push out. Maybe IC on their end, on their metrics, was not that popular, and they were like, okay, well, after Morrowind, we're not going to do much more for PvP, apart from maybe some performance stuff, which they're still working on, and hopefully that will also come to fruition, at least for PC, EU, and console. If you haven't seen my latest video on Cyrodiil performance being actually kind of fixed on PCNA, miraculously. And it's just really interesting how they say this outright, like, okay, we have different segments and we make content for these different segments. I do feel for the devs in some way, because there's crunch, and if anyone has ever seen any interviews or even like some like accounts from other game devs or developers, independent developers even, about crunch, oh, that's pretty awful. And I'm glad that it seems it's been kind of handled for the most part. Other than that, they do touch on how new players start in ESO. I am not a big fan personally of, or at least previously, I guess they started them in the new chapter, which I understand because they're trying to get the new content out and introduce the players. But I feel like for a lot of players, I would maybe make some sort of a stronger indicator in the tutorial area as to which area you should probably go with if you want a chronological storyline, or in a sense. I'm just not I understand why they give the players so much freedom to start wherever. I'm just not personally a fan of it in terms of like lore, like chronologically speaking. But whatever, that's kind of a minor thing. And I do like the fact that he kind of refers to other MMOs where, oh, you gotta hit level cap and then you unlock a new area, or you gotta go to this new area to grind and stuff like that. I think ESO does that part fine. Does that make Overland easy? And yes, it does, I would say, for a lot of players, but that's, again, an entirely different story as well. Moving on, again, they kind of keep bringing up the fact that we gotta find this sweet spot between MMO players and Elder Scrolls players, and in my opinion, guys, if you want to enjoy ESO as a MMO, I don't know if like that will last for too long. I hope that they do emphasize more on the MMO side in the future. I feel like Rich kind of understands that the MMO aspect is really important here. It's not just the Elder Scrolls stuff that'll keep the game alive, right? The game interesting, because he even says it himself, right? I mean, where do you say? He said the content is there, and you can play it and enjoy it, but you really log in to talk to those people. I love that he said it. I don't love how they do it in terms of like, okay, so at the same time, while you encourage solo play, and that's fine, I feel like they don't give enough to the guild system. I don't feel like they give enough incentive to group up and do a trial together, really. Again, this all goes back to the root problem of incentives and the reward system, right? You can talk to anyone from PvP, trials, battlegrounds, even Tales Reboot, and all these like kind of group or multiplayer experiences. They're really nice. They're really like. I say this all the time. If ESO, if it wasn't for the community, if it wasn't for the people I've met over the 8 years I played this game, right? I would not have stayed. Period. I don't care how many chapters they churn out. I don't care how much content they put out. I don't care if they even do 2 or 3 trials a year. as a raider. I just don't. Because at the end of the day, who you raid with, or who you play with, or who you interact with, who you talk to, I think that's the real, like, actual fucking magic of ESO, and overall, the MMO genre. And also, like, the people who, I would say, buy a lot of the crowdsource stuff are definitely, like, they lean a lot towards the MMO aspect, not the Elder Scrolls aspect. And the reason why I bring this up in terms of like profitability is because of what is in the next section of the article, where we talk about the pressure. So I don't know if you guys know this, it's common knowledge hopefully at this point, but ESO, the Elder Scrolls Online MMO IP, is literally making more money than all 11 editions of Skyrim combined. It's making more money than Fallout 76. It's making more money than whatever, like under the ZeniMax Media umbrella. Meaning, it's making more money than Fallout. It's making more money than Skyrim. It's making more money than Oblivion. Whatever. Like under the entire ZeniMax Media umbrella, not ZOS, not Bethesda, the entire umbrella encompassing all this, ESO is their #1 moneymaker. And I think it's not just the added pressure of building on the Elder Scrolls IP, and that's also kind of a different story. But I think there's this huge pressure too at like, okay, well, you're the most profitable right now, so you keep it up, right? And as for the like Elder Scrolls IP or brand, I get that too. Like, imagine the pressure, because Todd Howard has literally announced Starfield, and the Elder Scrolls 6 is not even in development. It's not even close to starting development. They're still working on Starfield, and I don't know when the Elder Scrolls 6 is coming out, but according to sources that are familiar with game development, it's probably not going to be for at least another 3 to 4, maybe 5 years until they actually like get anything done for the Elder Scrolls 6. So while that's a bummer for a lot of Elder Scrolls players, that puts even more pressure on ESO as a sort of continuing expansion of Elder Scrolls lore, the Elder Scrolls experience. And that's why I said earlier, like, if you want to play ESO as a MMO experience, I feel like that time is kind of running out, because, again, as more time passes, more people will want to experience. No one's going to keep playing Skyrim for another 20 years or 10 years, right? So, I'm sure there will be, but, like, not... You know, that number will undoubtedly dwindle as more and more new games and IPs come out from other companies and other places, right? So that's why I feel like, yeah, that there's that insane pressure of trying to upkeep the Elder Scrolls IP while somehow trying to appeal to the MMO player base and solo players and whatever players at the same time. That's insane. And the fact that, again, it's basically like the biggest moneymaker right now for ZeniMax Media, that's even more pressure to keep doing what they're doing. And yeah, that's a really interesting thing that I've noted. The fact that Starfield is, you know, they'll undoubtedly probably make some more content for it in terms maybe with DLCs or something, or it could be you know, sort of have some live service aspects to it. So yeah, I don't know. And of course, ZeniMax Online Studios is also working on at least one other new IP, whether that's an MMO IP or not an MMO IP, doesn't matter. They have an entire different team working on the new IP while upkeeping ESO. So with all these, like, with this like workload, with this pressure, and the fact that perhaps ZOS is also stretched in, or maybe even stretched in, but at the same time also expanding more. We might kind of be stuck with the 1 chapter a year and 2 DLCs a year and one zone a year format, which I kind of worry about as a MMO player, because it's like, well, that's cool, but it feels like there aren't any more surprises coming, or even anything astronomical coming. I really hope I'm proven wrong. You know, I don't know why some people think I want ESO to die, or like I just love talking shit about ESO or some shit. The fact is, like, if ESO does well, I do well too. So it's like, I really hope that they do ESO well in the coming years. And again, as I said, as long as there's people that want to play ESO, they're going to continue supporting it. And I think that's a pretty bold statement. Pretty general, like, kind of like PR statement, but yeah, I mean, I can vibe with that too. Oh yeah, what do you guys think about the information you got from this interview? One really cool thing I like about this interview is the last thing they mentioned, or Rich mentioned. Like, who are these guys coming and take over the IP? Early on, there were some struggles and trust issues there. I think this is kind of referring to the lore side, actually, from what I've heard. Anyway, I think Todd Howard. A lot of players don't realize this, but Todd Howard has a lot of say in ESO in terms of like lore and what should appear in the game. So that's why when players are asking for more stuff on Dwemer, Akavir or Akaviri, and some other stuff that Elder Scrolls players haven't seen, that's where he kind of comes in. So maybe that's kind of what it's referring to in terms of at least the world building aspect. However, at the same time, ESO I think has done the biggest job as probably the biggest Elder Scrolls game to kind of expand the world out the Elder Scrolls like visually as well. We've gone to zones we've never seen or mentioned in the mainstream before. We've seen the Slowed, which is like kind of insane the more I think about it, like I guess lore-wise. And we just have been seeing a lot of cool things. But again, that is a different story, yet again, from making an MMO for solo players in the Elder Scrolls Online. So, thanks for watching, stay safe, have fun, and stay healthy, guys. I hope you have a wonderful week, weekend, or day, wherever you're watching this forever. See you guys next time, have fun.